Hey everyone, this is a video about the Roborabbit-labs Halloween Jam. It's some workshops that I've created to teach people how to work with electronics and wearables, and the theme was Halloween, so it happened on the 29th and the 30th of October 2020. And I designed this jack-o'-lantern pumpkin out of felt and with a very simple wearable circuit as a first project. So this is the instructional video, and it's also for people to see what exactly the project was about. So enjoy! First, we start with cutting out all the pieces according to the templates which I provided in the kit, and I'm going to arrange them the way I'd like them to be just for my own reference. So this is sort of creating an idea on how I'd like the pieces to sit in relation to each other, and that I have enough space for everything, and yeah, that where I'd like to start sewing on the eye, because that's your first reference point for assembling the rest of the piece. So here I show I've split the thread. The embroidery thread comes with 6 strands together. I've split it, and then I do blanket stitch, but you can also just do a very simple tacking or running stitch just to put the eye on. And I've used a high contrast yellow on the black, but you could also just have used the black from the kit. Now sewing on the other eye, and I've just arranged the mouth with it just to again give myself a reference point on the spacing of everything, especially since I am too lazy to sew it down, like tack it down in place, and also I didn't want to use office pins to keep it in place, which you could do. But yeah, that's second eye on. And now on to step 3, which is sewing the LEDs and the battery holder on. Initially, I just sort of put the battery holder onto the piece to get like an idea of where I'm going to put my lines, like where I'm going to draw my conductive or sew my conductive thread in an arc pattern. I've cut a piece of a length of conductive thread about 20 centimeters long, and I proceed to sew the negative terminal of the battery onto the felt, and then I cross sew by sewing underneath the stitches a few times, so it looks like a bit of an X pattern or something like this, to make sure I've got very good contact between the battery holder and the conductive thread. There shouldn't be any gaps. So it should be a very reliable contact and very secure. Then I've sewn up to the eye area, and I've attached the LED sequin also using the same conductive thread without cutting it. And again, sew through the loop and then sew around the stitches. And now I'm sewing the tail in. So that we don't get a short circuit later. And this is knotting the thread and then sewing from the positive terminal of the eye to the positive terminal of the battery, and again doing the double kind of sewing, which is sewing through the loop and then sewing around those stitches just to make sure I've got the best contact, and then sewing in an arc towards the battery positive terminal. And as we stitch around the terminals of the battery, it gets more secure, and good to make sure that the battery holder is flat before you start sewing, that you don't get some puckering on the felt. Whenever sewing with conductive thread, it can be that the thread gets kind of knotted and bent and wonky and difficult to work with. most of the time you can save it. If you can't save it, it's good to just sort of backtrack, pick it out and start again, maybe use a new thread. Or once you got a bit of experience, you learn to work quite carefully with it and prevent it from getting into knots. Here I start with the left eye, again negative terminal, going to the negative terminal of the battery. It's a lot easier to work with to work towards the battery once you've got it a bit secured on the right side. So now we're going to sew on the eye covers. For the rest of the piece, it's just simple sewing with regular thread. And again, you can go for high contrast or a thread that blends into the color of felt that you're using. This is just a simple running stitch because a blanket stitch would have been quite bulky, and I've already used a blanket stitch on the backing. I thought the nose would look pretty cute with a blanket stitch as well. But I must admit, a simple running stitch, which I did on another example of this, had its own charm. Next we're going to sew the mouth on, and this is a little bit different from the other pieces because we leave access on the top and the bottom of the mouth felt or the mouth cover to be able to use the on and off switch of the coin cell battery holder and to insert the battery on the top to change the battery later. So you end up using the sewing around the left and right side of the mouth, and the top and bottom are open. Next, we're just going to sew some groove lines onto the pumpkin to attach it to the backing. So I've decided to use black thread for that because I feel like it would create a shadow effect better. And I just created like 4 or 5 lines around the edges, and if you look carefully you can see that I'm aiming for the little curves at the top of the pumpkin on the face. There's some little scalloped edges there that I'm using as a guide to sew those curved lines, those arcs. And I'm also trying to make it work with the conductive thread lines that I've already created, so it looks continuous. The colors are not that different. Conductive thread is gray, and the groove lines are black embroidery cotton. And here I illustrate how to remove the battery through the top access point, and you could change it if the battery runs out. And that's it. Thanks for watching.